two sides to it. There's one side which is the feedback of the session. Can you hear me? You're frozen. Hello? Are you there?
2 seconds.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. My lights in my office turn off at 5:45 so that I don't work later than I have to. And despite me knowing that it was going to happen, I did nothing to stop it. So everything's
Of course you did. What was I saying? Yeah, so there's two sides to it. One, when the session, which is basically asked as a clone of the user group feedback, like, you know, which session and the rating of the speaker, and any additional comments, and then the general one, so it's like which kind of feedback are you giving, and then if they say for the general feedback, then it's okay, so how was it? But then also I'm asking, who are you effectively? Like, how long have you been which area do you work in, and how long have you worked in that area, to kind of gauge who our actual like audience is, so we can then tailor to that audience, if that makes sense, for future.
I mean, it does make sense. In my mind, I was thinking like users will have to go through the feedback 3 times.
Yeah.
Submit each one of the things, but it makes sense.
Because the thing is, not everybody will have gone to all sessions. So I think if you've been to all sessions, do it 3. If you've been to 2 sessions, do 2. If you haven't been, just don't do any.
Yeah,
just don't say anything. Yeah.
There we go.
sometime yesterday, 2 p.m. yesterday, maybe.
Yeah. That'd probably be about right. These people who just travel all over the place, jetting everywhere.
Yeah, I would call them something, but it's recorded now.
and we are live streaming across YouTube and other areas, I believe, or at least YouTube.
Please do not say anything.
Yeah. And transcriptions on, so if we don't watch the video, we can at least read the notes of it. So,
I mean, most people ask me not to say anything, so
should we kick things off? I know people are still filtering in, but do you think we're ready to go?
We are, yes. Hello.
Hello.
Well, we've got both our speakers here for the night, so yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's all we need. That's all we need. All right. Well, hopefully my screen is sharing and you can see the welcome to the new virtual user group. Thank you all for attending. This is a new thing. We've been running virtual user groups in the local user groups for a while, but with things are opening up, people are going back to in person, and we felt there was just a need for some virtual user groups still for people that can't travel. Myself, I have a young child, and therefore I don't want to always be traipsing all the way around the country all the time, and I want to just be here for bedtime and everything else. So that's why we created this user group, and from the number of people that we've got in here already at 6 o'clock, it seems like people still do like a few virtual user groups every now and again. So thank you all for being here. Today's agenda. So firstly, welcome everyone. We've also got 2 amazing speakers. We are designing this user group to kind of split it into 2 halves. So if you don't want to attend the first half, but you want to attend the second half, or if you don't want to attend the second half, you want to attend the first half, you can do. The idea behind it is that you can go to the session that reflects your skill level. So what we're going to do at every user group is have a sort of more entry level, more beginner session from an expert speaker that allows you to bridge the gap between starting off in your career and getting new to Power Platform and Dynamics 365, as well as an expert level session as well. So tonight, Lewis Baybutt is going to take us through Microsoft's low code option in the Power Platform. Which will be a great session for anyone that is new to Power Platform or just getting started in their career and thinking about switching, things like that. And then we have Keith Whatling after the break, who will be talking about business process flows. If you don't know what business process flow is, Keith is going to tell you. They are great. They are awkward. They are amazing. They are technically difficult to master. There's loads of different things, and he'll be taking us through his pain points, his joyous points, and everything in between, I believe. And we will have time for pretty big flows. We will have time for some Q&A after each session as well, and we'll also a lot of us will be staying behind to answer any questions that anyone's got. Feel free to use the chat. And if you do want to ask questions after each speaker's gone, we can come off mute and do it that way. But yeah, use the chat and we'll all be in here together. So we want to say a big thank you to all our sponsors. The sponsors help the user groups around the UK. They allow us to put on meetings. They allow us to do events. They allow us the freedom to do a lot of things. So without the sponsors, we wouldn't be able to put on great events like this or the in-person ones that run by other groups. So big thank you to Clip Dimensions, DQ Global, Experian, Encodian, the Scallywags at Proximo 3, Digpacks, Curve Digital, and Avanade, because again, without them, and their support, we would not be able to run this user group. Now, just a quick introduction, and the less time that my face spends on the screen, the better. But who runs this user group? So it's run by 4 of us. We have Narayan, who if you don't know, is a whiz of all the streaming. He's currently handling all the streaming. It's a one-man show. I'm just imagining switches and cables everywhere in his house right now as he's trying to pump this live to various places, and he's on the decks trying to sort out all the music and everything else. So he's handling that. Trisha Sinclair is with us. She's in the chat. She's with us today. She is a tour de force. You can't say no to Trisha. There's only one word you say to Trisha, and that's yes or when. Would you like that? We have be on LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter in the future. Cool. We have me, who just bumbles along and figures this stuff out, and we have Mike as well, who is all about the accessibility. So making sure that this UG is accessible, making sure that we've got the right tools for accessibility to really make this an inclusive user group to bring us all together. So yeah, 3 important people and then me, essentially chugging along with this.
Do not talk yourself down, Mr. Collins-Jones. You are the one that set up this meeting invite, and you're the one who's been pulling us all together, so do not underestimate what you do, my friend.
Broken clock strike twice a day. Trisha, did you have a question?
No, I was just saying yes to what Mike was saying. We can move on. Sorry. Bye.
Okay. So again, let's not beat around the bush. Let's just get on with it, because you're not here to listen to me talk. You're here to listen to our experts talk. So I'm going to hand over to Lewis Baybutt, a newly minted MVP of the last few months, and he will be taking us through Microsoft's low-code approach to low-code with the Power Platform. Lewis.
Thank you, Matt. And just quickly before I get started, just a thank you to all of the sort of organisers for having me this evening. Can I just check, am I all right to share my PowerPoint live, or are you going through?
Yeah, awesome. You go for it.
Fantastic.
Stop sharing.
Brilliant. So thanks again for having me, and thanks everyone for joining this evening. So my session is going to be on Microsoft's approach to low code with the Power Platform. So for any of you that sort of haven't really looked too much at Power Platform or low code yet, hopefully this introduction session will sort of see you saying goodbye to pro code languages, and in the end, hopefully building some solutions really quickly with low code functionality. So for any of you that don't know me already, I'm Lewis Baybutt. I am a Power Platform functional engineer at ANS Group. I'm also a Microsoft Business Applications MVP and the author of my blog, lowcodelewis.com. We just get straight into it. So today we're sort of going to do, I'm going to do a bit of an introduction on low code and my Microsoft product stack. We're going to look at what Power Platform is, the different elements that we've got inside of the Power Platform. We're going to say hi to some SharePoint lists. And then we're going to work through 3 challenges, which are going to be building an app, building an automation, and building an interactive report. Once we've done all of that, we'll just go through a quick bit of an overview of what we've discussed, and some reminders on what the platform sort of is and what it's about. So just before we look at, sort of the vendor specific sort of what Power Platform is, this session is going to be on Microsoft's approach to low code. And low code being sort of a visual approach to building software that means we have to use sort of next to no code or a little bit of code that enables rapid delivery of digital solutions. And this is just one vendor that we're talking about here, that enables that fast delivery of solutions when you don't really need these pro code languages to sort of deliver these digital.
Sorry, Lewis. I'm so sorry to stop you. Would you mind resharing your PowerPoint, but sharing it without PowerPoint live, just so we can make sure that it gets streamed correctly?
Of course. Oh, sorry, one second.
Thank you so much. Sorry to stop you. You started brilliantly. It's great.
Sorry. Let me just.
The joys of working out how YouTube Live works with Teams and everything else.
Let me just move it onto the screen and hope that when I hit, I've got like 4 screens going on here, so I need it to be on a horizontal screen. And
the challenge of sharing the right screen and making sure you don't share the one you don't mean to.
Well,
we've all been there. more than once a day.
My slideshow on the vertical screen, which isn't going to be what you want to see. Okay, here we go. It's on my laptop screen. Okay, now let me share that one. There we go. Sorry if I'm now like looking over in this direction, but it's over here. Let's just come back. So if we sort of take a look at Microsoft's approach to low code, Microsoft's approach is the Power Platform. And it's sort of a no-code, low-code development platform that also welcomes little bits of pro code for you developers that want to extend its, out-the-box functionality and capabilities. So we've got 5 major products and a number of additional elements that come with those, and we'll take a look at those in more detail in a second. But we've basically got the capability to accelerate the development of all sorts of different things, including business applications, enterprise automations. We can build chatbots and conversational agents. We can build data-driven websites and interactive reports. So we've got a load of different things that we can build to properly build out great business digital solutions. I think one of the really great things about Power Platform, and one of the things I love, is that it really is designed for everyone. So whether it's your IT admins, whether it's, if you're an experienced developer, if you're just an end user, or perhaps what sometimes we call makers, it really is designed for everyone. So IT, then sort of wanting to put governance and frameworks in on the back end and, locking down things that perhaps aren't really the best tools that anyone should be able to use in an organization. Those tools are there. For sort of experienced developers, when you want to extend the platform and you want to do things like build custom connectors and leverage JavaScript and C# in different areas of the platform, that is definitely there too. But it's also got that really simple part for anyone that wants to just get to grips with building a really simple digital solution without needing to know those pro code languages. And that's where I think Power Platform is really great. One of the things that it also does is it supports Microsoft's vision for their one cloud. And what I mean by this is that Microsoft's clouds used to look a little bit different. And they used to be a bit more separate in that we had what's called the Microsoft 365 cloud, the Dynamics 365 cloud, and the Azure cloud. And they all sat a little bit separately. They're all marketed a little bit separately. And Microsoft has sort of moved those together now, similar to other vendors like Google, how they've got the Google cloud. And I think Power Platform really supports that idea of one cloud, especially with, the way that we've got like 1,000+ different data connectors that means that we can connect to all of these different platforms and APIs and build digital solutions from them. So if we now just take a bit of a closer look at those 5 major products and their additional sort of supporting elements. First, we've got Power Apps, and that basically allows us to build, anything from a really tiny app that might mean that we can track some issues, and we'll actually look at that in a bit later. Is that a question? Sorry, or did someone say something? No?
No, you're all good. You're all good.
Cool. So we're able to build anything from that, like a really tiny app that say I want to build like an issue tracker, or it might be like an enterprise-sized app that manages huge business processes. Next we've got Power Automate that lets us, again, from something really, really small, it might just be sending an email on a daily basis that updates someone on something, to automating a really large enterprise process with different building blocks and low-code elements. We're able to use Power BI to build interactive data reports, bringing data from all over the place, wherever it sort of may be, and using different visualizations that will filter based on interactions we have with each of them on a wider scale. We're able to use Power Virtual Agents, which is this sort of icon down here. I'm just realizing I haven't actually got the names next to each of them, so I'm going to point over here. Power Virtual Agents that lets us build AI-powered chatbots and conversational agents. If you've got something like a knowledge base and you want people to be able to ask questions about it, that's the kind of thing that we can build with Power Virtual Agents. And finally, we've got Power Pages, which is sort of quite somewhat new now. Product to the stack. Used to be part of Power Apps, and you might sort of be familiar with Power Apps portals, but now sits by itself with a little bit more sort of around it as Power Pages. But this isn't, the only part of Power Platform, and we do have these additional elements that you can see down the right hand side. So starting with Dataverse, we've basically got an enterprise data platform that we can build on top of and build our solutions with that encompasses a number of other things such as, security and all sorts. And we're able to leverage AI Builder, which lets us use low code functionality again, so we're not having to write, lines and lines of pro-code languages that people don't want to learn really anymore, and build solutions that are AI powered. We're able to use what's called PowerFX, which comes from the world of Excel, and it's sort of a simple open source formula language that we can use in what's called Canvas apps, one of the types of Power Apps, in custom pages, which is something that we can use in a different type of Power App, which is called a model-driven app. And finally, we can use it a little bit with Dataverse as well. We've got the ability to manage the platform at scale with insights and governance, which it might be something that, sort of IT or our admins want to do, and that's with something called managed environments. And finally, we've got the ability to connect to over 1,000 different places with the out-of-the-box connectors that are already there, created by both Microsoft, vendors, verified publishers, and, people in the community. With the ability to actually create your own connectors as well, so it doesn't even stop at those 1,000. So if we take all of that and we're now sort of going to look at trying to accomplish some challenges, we're going to dive into SharePoint now. We'll start with one of the out-the-box sort of templates that we can use for a list. And then we'll work on 3 different things. We're going to try and build an app. We'll see if we can make some edits to our app and share it. We'll try and build an automation, and we'll see that in action. And then finally, we'll build an interactive data report. So if I just switch over and we will dive straight into SharePoint. So over here, I've just got a really simple team site. You can create these in your SharePoint tenant if you've got access to do that. If you don't, I'd probably recommend checking out the Microsoft 365 developer program, which gives you access to a sandbox to do these kind of things in. If we take a look at this, all I'm going to do over here is come up to this new button here, which is going to give me a bunch of different options. I'm going to select to create a new list. And what I'm going to get here is loads of different templates that Microsoft have pre-created for me that might work for my use case. And I'm going to take a look at the issue tracker one for my use case scenario here. And you can see, I can see the different columns that we've got here. I can get a bit of an idea of what this template is going to give me. And if I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and select use template. Now, I'm going to have to give it a name to start with. And then give it a bit of a description. And finally, I can select whether I want this to appear in my team site navigation or whether I don't. I'm going to say yes for now because it's going to make it a little bit easier for me to get to. So just like that, I've selected the template and it's generated a list for me. I don't have to now sort of spend a while adding columns manually. I've got that stuff ready there out the box to use. And let's just sort of create a couple of issues right here. So let's say something like, I need my password resetting. Just do this so that we've got a little bit of data to work with. And actually, I'm going to say that I really need that doing quite quickly. And this is just going to stay as a new sort of report. I'm not going to assign it to anyone at the moment. I'm going to say that I'm the one reporting it. And let's say that it's been reported today. And do you know what? Some of these things that we've got in this template out of the box here, you might find that they're a little bit tedious. They're not that great. I don't necessarily want to say that today's the date that I'm having to report this on. That should kind of just be assumed out of the box. And we'll have a look at that when we get into Power Apps in a second. And we'll do some work there to make that a bit easier for our users. So straight away now, I've got that record over here that's been created. I've reported that issue. Now let's take a look at those 3 challenges that we were going to do that we looked at a minute ago. So the first one I wanted to do was build an app. That's what we're going to work on now. So if I take a look at this integrate button over here, I'm going to notice that I've got those same 3 products that we just saw a minute ago on our challenges: Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI. So to start with, I'm going to work on my app challenge. So I'm going to just hover over Power Apps, and I've got something here that lets me create an app. I'm going to select that, and straight away, we're going to be able to generate and build an app based off of our list that we've got here without really taking too many steps. And this is really a great place to get started. So I'm going to call this app Report a Service Issue. And I'm just going to select Create. And now we'll give Power Apps a couple of seconds, maybe a minute or two. And we're going to see our app sort of be created in front of us. And then we'll be able to make some changes and do some different things to make it work for us. So if we just give this a couple of seconds, hopefully it won't be too slow. Go. So straight away, I've got an app that I can interact with. We're going to take a little bit of a look at what we've actually built already, or what the system's built for us, and then we'll try and make some changes. So if I take a look at this, I've got a list view of all of the data that I could see in my SharePoint list. If I click into these, I can see more details about the reported issues. I've got the ability to delete them from within my app. I can even edit them and say, oh, hey, actually, I know who I want to assign this issue to now. So I'm going to go and assign this to John. And I can even then say straight away that I want to save that. And what's really cool is that if we take a look at our list now and just refresh this, you can see straight away the changes that I've made in my app have now updated in my SharePoint list, which is my sort of data store, if you like. So if we come back to our app, I've also got the ability to sort of search on the list of data that I've got here. I can sort it in alphabetical order or the other way around. And let's see, I can even sort of start reporting my issues directly from this app, which might be the thing that I want to share with my users and give them to report things via. So if I start by saying, oh, this is a new one, let's go, I can't access Power Apps. Could you help me? And I can select some different things. Say that this is a new issue. I don't know who I'm going to assign it to yet, so I'm going to leave that blank. I've reported it today, and that's all I'm going to add for now, and just select yes to report that. And in the same way that a minute ago I edited one of my existing issues and it updated in SharePoint, the way that I've just sort of created a new one via my app here, I'm going to head over to SharePoint, and you can see that I've got that record created in my SharePoint list. So anything that I'm doing in my app is updating in my data store. So now if I come back over here, let's look at actually now making a couple of changes to our app. I perhaps want it to look a little bit different. I don't really want to spend too much time on it, but these aren't really the colors that work with my organization's brand. So I'm going to come up here to the theme tab, and I'm going to take a look at what I've got here. And let's say that purple matches my organization's theme. So I'm going to select that over here. And really quickly, just by selecting a different theme, I've got almost a completely redesigned app with different colors that actually now works for my organization, and is a bit more familiar with what my users might be expecting. But now let's take things a little bit further. See, I don't really know that I like this icon over here. I want that to look a little bit different. So I'm going to select that icon over here, and in that icon, I've got a property called icon that I'm going to be able to use to select what I want it to look like. I can select from a bunch of different icons in Power Apps, and you know, I can do different things here. So we'll pick something completely random for now. So let's just, select a thumbs up, or we could select something that looks a little bit more like an open. So we've got loads of different options out the box without having to go and fetch things from different places or go to the web to find icons. Straight away, I've got all of these different options that I can use to start to make my app look a bit different. And already, that icon is actually still working. I don't need to do anything more than just change that quick little design thing. But one of the things that I remember that I said over here in SharePoint is that my users having to, say things like, yeah, this was reported today, is a little bit of a tedious task. They shouldn't really need to say, whilst they're reporting something, that this is the current time that they're doing it. We should just be able to pick that up, without needing to ask them that. Now, what I might do, generally, is use some out-the-box columns that SharePoint's got. And if we just take a look at what we've got over here, we have got columns that say created, and we've got created by. We can even see when the record was last modified. So if we just apply those and have a look at what we've got going on here, these values will always be up to date based on the activity that's happening around these records. So I will always have a record of when this item was created. But if we sort of stick with what Microsoft have gone with here, and we'll look at the sort of out-of-the-box template, and let's say I do want to leverage this date reported column. Over here, I want to make some changes to this date picker. And on this kind of form that's, we've added some data cards to basing them off of fields. If we want to make any changes, we're going to have to right click on it, and we're going to select unlock. Now I'm already actually on what's called a property over here that I want to use to now determine what the default date of this data picker what this date picker will be set to. And really simply, I'm just going to use a simple formula, and any of you that are sort of familiar with Excel, you might start to notice that as I'm writing these formulas, stuff has been brought from over there. I'm just going to write today and open and close a bracket, and straight away there, I've got today's date being populated into this date picker by default. So now, if I was to populate my form with an issue, straight away I got today's date as the reported date, and I can go and select to submit that, and today's date will arrive in my data source. But users have still now got the ability to say, actually, no, I reported that yesterday, and suddenly it looks like my service team are a day behind, and they've taken too long to solve that issue. So we're going to go a step further, and we're actually going to say that I'm going to keep that idea of, defaulting that date picker to today's date. But I now actually want to say that, well, hold on. I don't want this date picker to be visible or editable by my users. And what I'm not doing here is deleting it, but what I am doing is I'm going to hide it. So I'm going to select the entire data card here. And from there, I'm going to go to a property over here called visible. And this basically determines whether, that object on the screen, that control, is visible or not. And at the moment, you can see it set to true to say, yeah, that's visible. And I'm just going to take that out and set that to false. And just like that, now that card is sort of disappeared. We're not going to see it, but it's still there working in the background using that default date property to set the date as today. So really simply there, I've now got that column being populated with the current time, the current date, every time someone submits an issue. But they don't have to see it and they can't change it. Now, if I go ahead and save this up over here, and now I want to distribute it to my users, I'm just going to click save, and once I've done that, I'll need to publish it. Any changes that I save don't necessarily appear to my users straight away until I've published my application. So I can continue to work and make edits without actually, publishing my changes to my users. So let's go ahead and publish this application. Now that I've done that, I'm going to click this little icon over here, and I'm going to be able to share my app with another user. So over here, I'm just going to type in John. I want John to be able to report issues now. But now I've got a little bit of a warning over here telling me that I need to do some other things. So over here, I'm getting a bit of a warning that's saying, hey, hold on. Yep, you're sharing your app, but there's a little bit more work that we need to do at the moment. So over here, Power Apps is basically telling us the data connectors that we've used in our application that we now need to also share with our users. So for now, I'm just going to say, yep, I want to share my app with John, and I'm going to send John an email to invite him to use my application. But now, I do actually still need to go and give John access to the connections that I've used in my application, or the data sources that I've used in my application. And for my case, that's just this list over here. Now, there's two ways that I can share the data in this list with John. The first thing I could do is I could add him to my SharePoint site as a member. I could add him as a visitor. If I added him as a visitor, he'd be able to view my data. He wouldn't be able to sort of interact and edit it. If I added him as a member of my site, he'd be able to edit the data. But That's not necessarily what I want to do in this case. If I did that, it would mean that John might be suddenly able to access all of the other data in other lists in my SharePoint site, and that's not perhaps what I want to do. See, if I'm using this site for lots of different things and perhaps confidential data, yeah, that's really not actually what I want to be doing now. So in this case, I'm just going to select share on the list. And now I'm going to type in John's name again. And now I'm going to select that he's able to edit items within the list. I don't want him to be able to edit the list, which means that he could add additional columns, remove columns, which might break my app. I just want him to be able to edit the data in the list. So I'm going to set up those permissions, and now I'm going to click send. And now John's got access to both my app and the data behind it so that he can interact with that through my app properly. So that's a little bit on Power Apps, and now we're going to move on to our next challenge. If I head back over to the first step that we did when we wanted to look at Power Apps, we're going to look at this integrate button again. And the next one we're going to use is Power Automate. And if we sort of set ourselves up with a bit of a challenge here, what I want to do here is I want to be able to select one of the items in my issue list, and I want to be able to say, I want to click another button and send an email off to the person who reported my issue with an update as to how that's been resolved. And actually, hold on, before I select create a flow and I want to start building my process out, I'm going to add an additional column over here. I'm going to give it the data type of multiple lines of text. And I'm going to call this the resolution. Now here, I'm giving my admins now the ability to, write against this record or this issue, how they've resolved it. The reason that I'm doing this is, so I've got two options here as to how I could tell my users the way in which I've resolved their issue. Either I could use an additional input to the email I'm going to send, and each time I try and send that email, I'm going to get a dialog that says, populate this box quickly, and then that will end up in my email that gets sent to my users. Or I can fetch that little bit of data from my record, in this case my resolution, but this means that I've also got it logged against my issue. So every time I need to go back and figure out how something was resolved, I'm not searching through my sent box to figure out what I inputted to a dialog. I'm actually just able to go and review that issue, and I can see that that's a resolution there. So now if we move on to actually building that automation, that means I'm going to be able to update users as to the status of their issue. Let's select the integrate button again, and we're going to look at Power Automate this time. We're going to click create a flow. This is where we're going to start building that, low size, small automation. And I've got a bunch of different templates over here, and I'm just going to look for the one that says complete a custom action for the selected item. Now, if I select this time, we're going to get taken off to Power Automate. And the first thing Power Automate is going to say to me is, I want to get a little bit of permission to work with some data. I'm going to create a connection to this service over here. In my case, is SharePoint. And I'm going to say, yep, that's fine. We can click continue. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to give my flow a name. And I'm going to call this give my issue reporter an update. Now, one of the things that I said that we could do a minute ago is add additional inputs into my process that every time a user triggers this, they will be requested to sort of provide that information via a dialog. And I might actually want to say, hey, before users actually click that process and trigger it without knowing what's going to go on inside of it, let's make sure that they've confirmed they know exactly what they're doing and they are going to send an email to someone. And I'm going to do that using a yes/no input over here. And I just want them to confirm that actually, yeah, they want to send an email. Now, this might not be the reason that you use what's called an input parameter to your flow, but you might use it for something else. In this case, I'm just going to use it to provide my users with a little bit of feedback and get them to confirm that, yes, they do want to send an email to someone and it's going to come from them. So if I now look at the rest of my flow, I'm going to add what's called a conditioning over here. And this is basically going to let me take a little bit of data from somewhere previous in my flow, Now, either the trigger, which always sits at the top of my Power Automate flow, or any of the actions which always sit under the top of my flow. And in this case, I just want to find that little bit of content from my trigger, which is my send an email input parameter. So over here, I'm going to look for that send an email content, and I'm just going to select it like that. Now, really simply, I'm just taking that data that someone has passed into my flow via that dialog that they're going to get, and I'm able to now utilize it in anywhere else in my process. Now here, what I'm basically doing is I'm saying, I want to confirm that people actually know that they're going to send an email, and so I need this input to have been true. I need that to be a yes, a tick box, and they do actually want to send that email. So I'm going to say this has to equal to true. Excuse me. And then if it is, I'm going to do anything that's in the if yes branch over here. But if it isn't, and this condition doesn't pass, if send an email doesn't equal to true, then I'm going to do anything in the if no branch. Now I'm going to leave the if no blank for now, because this is just a confirmation. If it equals to no, there isn't actually anything that I need to do in this case. So I'm just going to focus on the if yes branch over here. And I'm going to look for a send an email action. Now this is going to leverage the Office 365 Outlook connector, and I'm going to be able to use that to send an email from my Power Automate flow. So first, I'm going to look at sending my email to the person who's logged my request in the first place. And now to get their email, I'm going to use some dynamic content again in the same way that I use content over here to get a bit of data from that input parameter. I'm going to use dynamic content this time to get data out of one of my flow actions. And in this case, it's going to be the get item action, which retrieves data on the item that I've selected previously. Now over here, I'm going to say, give me the email address for the person who has logged my issue. And now I can go ahead and give my email a subject, and I can write a body to that email. So I'm going to say an update on your issue, and then I might want to contextualize this a little bit. So I'm going to add the title of this issue, so users can sort of really quickly see from that notification that flies in on their desktop or their mobile phone, this is the issue that we're referring to. They don't need to tap into that to find out what we're talking about. So here I'm just going to say, hi, here's an update on your issue report. And now I might want to say that I'm going to give them the status of the issue. So I'm going to say that the status is this, and I'm going to add the status value dynamic content. And then I might want to give them an update on how this was resolved. So let's say your issue resolution is, then I'm going to add the dynamic content for my resolution column that we created a minute ago in my SharePoint list. I'm just going to sign off as thanks. Now, I've finished making my flow and my automation now, so I'm just going to quickly click save. And that's really all I need to do now in Power Automate. I've just used some quick low-code building blocks. I've typed in a little bit of an email body, and straight away I'm going to be able to automate the process of someone having to open Outlook, compose an email, copy data from SharePoint to their email screen, and send emails. I'm just going to do that with a click of a button now. So if we return to SharePoint now, what I wanted to be able to do was select a record, click a button, and it run my automation. So I'm now going to do that for this record over here. I'm going to select the one that's been logged by myself. I need my password resetting. I've got a resolution to that issue. Let's just set the status as completed. And now I'm going to give my user an update to the resolution of this issue by selecting Automate. And here I'm going to get a list of all of the automations I've created to work with this list. So here you can see the name of my flow that I've got over here. I'm just going to select that. And now what you'll remember me talking about a minute ago was my dialog of input parameters and sort of things that I can provide and push into my flow. Now, here I've got one of those input parameters, and this is the sort of dialogue that we're looking at, and the place that we will, populate those inputs. And here I'm just going to confirm that yes, I do want to send an email. I'm going to pass that value in as true, and now in my flow, it's going to pass my condition and work on my send an email step. So if we now run my flow, the next thing I'm going to do is just head over to my inbox, and I'm going to do that over here and then just show you the email in a second. And over here you can see that straight away I've got my email sent to myself, my inbox. I've got that dynamic subject that's being populated there with the title of my issue. I've got the status of my issue, and I've got the resolution that's been provided by the person that worked on that ticket. So that's a little bit of an introduction to how we can start to automate some simple processes with Power Automate. And we're just going to quickly finish up on building some interactive data reports with Power BI. So I'm actually going to switch over to another list that I've got here that's got a little bit more data in it, so that we can build a report that actually shows something more than 2 records. With 2 records, we might not have too much to work with. We might not get some proper graphs and that kind of stuff. But over here, I'm going to head straight back over to that Integrate tab that we had. I'm going to select Power BI, and I've just got one button available here because I haven't got any pre-existing reports. And I'm just going to select Visualize the List. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, and this is what I tested out the other evening, was that if you're doing this for the first time and you haven't used Power BI before, you haven't accepted the T's and C's of Power BI, or you haven't registered for a trial, that kind of thing, you might notice that first you get a couple of redirects and it doesn't work straight away. I tried it again, and then it does work on that second time after you've used Power BI for the first time, or the Power BI service / the online type of version in your environment. If you haven't used Power BI before, just head over to app.powerbi.com, follow any of the prompts that you get, and once you're logged in for the first time, head back to SharePoint, click that Visualize the List button, and things should work fine. But you just need to make sure that you've done that first login to Power BI sometimes for this to work. But straight away, all I've done there is selected Integrate, Power BI, Visualize the List, and straight away, SharePoint and Power BI have generated an interactive data report for me. And I can see all sorts of things from my data, including sort of natural language pullouts from that data set and visualizations here. So if I just head back over here, give me one moment, and we'll just sort of do a bit of an overview and discuss what we've looked at. So we've just gone through those 3 challenges of working with a SharePoint list to build an app, build an automation, and build a report. And we've done those all fairly quickly without using any pro-code languages and simply low-code building blocks. So if we just have a bit of an overview of Microsoft's approach to low-code. We're working with a low-code development platform that gives us the ability to build these digital solutions at a really fast pace without the need for programming skills or pro-code development skills as such. We've got 5 major products, including Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, Power Virtual Agents, and Power Pages, that let us produce these digital solutions with their additional supporting elements. As I said, I think one of the great things about Microsoft's approach to low-code with Power Platform is that it is really designed for everyone. It's designed for your IT admins. It gives them the ability to govern the platform with, different tool sets. It's designed for experienced developers who want to leverage languages like C# and JavaScript, HTML, CSS to extend the low-code capabilities of the platform as it is. And it really is designed with a huge focus on makers and end users to make things simple and still build solutions at a rapid pace. And finally, it's a really great thing that we've got the ability to connect to data anywhere and build solutions to fit business requirements at pace. We've got 1,000+ connectors that we can use to work with Power Platform. So we really can connect to a bunch of different platforms, take data from anywhere, and do things with that content. That is going to be me for this evening. If anyone has got any questions, do feel free to just pop your hand up and ask. I'm just sort of seeing stuff in the chat now because I haven't had my Teams window open.
Do you have a question from, is it Gov?
Yep. Can I ask Lewis, at the beginning of the presentation you said that this was Microsoft's interpretation of a low-code platform.
And it sort of sits in the middle a little bit is my sort of understanding, but my hands-on focus has been mainly with Power Platform. It is sort of where my focus is, to be honest.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any other questions? If there isn't, Matt, I will hand back over to you.
We've got a question from Gavin quickly.
Oh, go on, Gavin.
Yeah, just quickly. So if the low-code person's finished their app and then someone with a bit more coding experience comes along, perhaps, or a database professional, are they able to find the raw data for the data that's been stored? Where does that actually get stored?
So in this demo, the place that we stored our data was in SharePoint. Now, there's a bunch of different places that you could be storing data and working with that data in Power Platform. So it could be in SQL, it could be in Dataverse, which is the data platform that sits on Power Platform, Microsoft's enterprise data platform as such. And there are those admin centers and sort of governance tools that means that you can go and see the different objects in your tenant and the different places where users have been storing data. If you did just go into an app and edit that app, I'll just share my screen really quickly again, and I'll show you where we can quickly see the data sort of sets that we've used in our application.
So when you stored it in SharePoint, it was solo code. It was a bit confusing for me as a database professional.
Yeah. So over here in Power Apps, I've got this tab for data. So in my Canvas apps, I'm able to go over to this tab for data and I can see all of the data connectors that I've used. So here I can just hover over and see that this is the data set I've used. I've got the site address there, and this would be the same if it was Dataverse. I'd get, say if I add a table into this app right now, I've got now a Dataverse table over here. I can just hover over that, see the table that I've used, see that it's in the current environment, and see the connection that I'm using. So you've always got that data tab to be able to go back and see where users have put data for that your application utilizes.
Okay. If it's in the SharePoint, is it basically a CSV file or is it some other special file?
I feel like someone else on the call know a lot more about how SharePoint actually works, but I understand it works on SQL. Someone else will tell me the back end of SharePoint.
Depends. Well, SharePoint's just the same as everything else, right? Behind the scenes somewhere, right? And you can kind of get to it, play with it. It's not a database though. It's a data source. So it doesn't have things like referential integrity, cardinality, anything like that you'd expect a database to have. That said, you can go a long way making some really cool apps in SharePoint. Think of it like this. If you have a set of lookup data, and you only really want to go 1 or 2 levels above, and then your main kind of table of stuff, that's a good SharePoint app, no more. Okay, so like referential data above it, 1 layer of joy, and then very little in the way of child records, because it's not going to do that. If you try and make some quasi join table in SharePoint, you are going to come you're going to think, great, 6 months down the line, you're going to be cursing the day that you ever did that, because there's all weird things you'll be doing to hide the data source from everyone, because SharePoint is open. The whole point of SharePoint is everyone can see the data. So you end up getting into a mess really quickly, and we've had to backtrack a lot with customers who have kind of gone down the, hey, I'm not paying for this route. It's free, Liam, seeded. Like, so if ever anyone uses the words free around SharePoint and like Power Platform, just bash them around the head and tell them don't do that, because like it's genuinely going to end up in a bad place. And we've seen customers spend, like, I've seen one customer at the previous place spent millions of pounds building Power Apps. They refused to pay any license into Microsoft. They said we're only going to use SharePoint because that's what InfoPath was on. And then just ended up in the same kind of quagmire that InfoPath did, because it didn't have a data strategy really around SharePoint. So that's where a more robust and rigorous data source comes in. And I would recommend things like SQL. I recommend things like Salesforce and Oracle and Azure and AWS. But the one that I would kind of single out above all the others is Microsoft's Dataverse, purely for this one salient and incredible reason. Once you build tables in Dataverse and you build an app in Dataverse, you build a model-driven app in Dataverse, which kind of is just like it's quite a quick thing to get started on. Like, you can build a model-driven app way faster than you can build a Canvas app, right? Is that you've just built the back end. Like, you've just built the back end, and it's a back end that works like Oracle or SAP works, where if you see a record, if you see something in blue, you can click on it, go to that view, go to that form. You can't do that. Well, you can do that a little bit in SharePoint, but it's just janky as hell. And it doesn't respect referential integrity, and it doesn't do any of the other cool stuff that Dataverse does. But Dataverse is one of those things that I've seen businesses avoid. Not because they didn't know it was there, just because they didn't know it was there, right? So I've seen major customers building entirely with premium connectors on MongoDB, on their own proprietary SQL tables and databases and stuff, not knowing that Dataverse was even a thing, and then seeing it and going, wow, how much time could we have saved building our estate out if we just used Dataverse? And things like virtual tables and all this other cool stuff. If you're a database guy and you said you're a database person, check it out, because when you see it, it's like, oh, that.
Yeah, it's the best source.
Yeah, it's lots of fun. I hope I did. Was I not speaking out of turn? Sorry, Lewis.
It's probably a whole other talk. Discuss data sources.
It is a whole other talk, but I do want to say, of course, we have total newbies to D365 and Power Platform. Is there anywhere that you would recommend that they go to have a deeper understanding of exactly, Keith, what you just said?
So there's a couple of places I go to look at that, right? First of all, I'd hit up the Microsoft Learn website. I'd look at what is based on Dataverse, so that whole ecosystem of first-party Dynamics apps, with the exception of F&O and a few others that sit on that ERP side of the house. I'd recommend people having a look at the lovely Matt Collins-Jones, because you can learn a lot about doing flow with Dataverse on that, because he's done an absolute ton of stuff. I'd go and listen to Chris Huntingford, which is always an experience. And listen to how he talks enthusiastically about Dataverse. I'd listen to Andrew Welch, and I'd read his blog, which I've got somewhere, because he's always talking about it at work, and we but I'll post one of those in the chat in just a second, and that talks about the strategy, the overarching strategy of a data ecosystem and a platform approach. And quite often Dataverse is the kind of interactive data layer where stuff sits. You're your reporting database, but you actually your exceptions reporting and your active data is quite often in Dataverse outside of the ERP. All the transactions happen in the ERP, but the business runs primarily on Dataverse. So there's lots of really good people to go and look at there. On the technical side of things, I'm trying to think of someone who's amazing technically at Dataverse, Scott Duro, and that other guy whose name just absolutely just pops into my mind and went out again. And I read his blog all the time and he's going to kill me and I can't remember, so I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
What does it sound like?
And just anyone who's in the D365 community, like one of the things that a lot of people in D365 didn't realise was like Dataverse, first-party apps, same thing. It's like same, but different. The difference is in a practice approach when you're building stuff, the first-party applications you're customizing and extending with Dataverse, whereas when you're building Power Platform with Dataverse, you are branching out towards those first-party applications down the line somewhere because you might integrate with them at some point. There's architectural considerations for that. But like you're kind of thinking, I can build quite a big custom enterprise solution that's built on enterprise-grade technology, but in a completely composable way. Hope that helps.
Thank you. In the chat, if you wanted additional resources of understanding the different data sources, there are a lot of links now from everyone that Keith's just mentioned. Thank you so much for that, Keith. And thank you so much for that, Lewis. I think we have time for like one last question before we go off to break. Any one last question or? Okay, great. I'm going to hand back to MCJ or Mike.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you for that, Lewis. That was, I mean, it's always one of these things to me that I find crazy that you can build an application, you can build some automation, and you can build a graphical interface to show the reporting of the data, and you can build all those things. Excuse me. You can build all those things in half an hour. I once watched Keith Whatling build an EWOC salvage repair app in the space of 15 minutes, and it was pretty incredible to watch that. So that's the power of low code. That's the whole point of that talk. Is that's the power of what you can do. Yes, it's quick. Yes, we've cut a few corners because we've used, SharePoint lists, we've done other things, but it shows the power of what you can do very, very quickly with low code. So that's why this is important. And again, it goes from low code to pro code, and it goes from individual apps through to enterprise grade apps. All sorts of companies run on the Power Platform these days. So although what Lewis showed you was just like the beginning, there is lots more to learn. One of the links I dropped in the chat actually was Power Platform Weekly. So it's a set of community members that collate and collect all the relevant blog posts from the last week and videos and podcasts and stuff and send it out to your inbox every week. So it's a really great thing to sign up for because you get that whole view of everything. So yeah, that's one of the things. So yeah, thank you, Lewis, for that. That was a really great presentation. We really appreciate you being part of the first virtual UG. We're going to take a break. No worries. We're going to take a break now for about, I think it's 10 minutes, just to let people get drinks and come back. And then we'll have the amazing, the undisputed champion of the world, Mr. Keith Whatling. He's not so sure.
Only in Canvas apps, mate. I'm doing model driven today, so there you go. And don't expect too much.
I have complete faith in your abilities, man.
Model driven are awesome. I love model driven.
Dog ugly, look terrible. All the customers hate them. Thank you.
Yeah. So it looks like we actually have 15 minutes. So we'll be back in 15 minutes. Give people a break, get a brew, go to the loo. Keith can finish his demo, and then we. Then we can present on it.
Finish my demo in 15 minutes before everyone comes back?
Yeah. I'm watching build map in 15 minutes. Let's do it, yeah.
I think we got it. Chris did it about 7.5, and I went back. I thought it'd be a really good idea to demo this to a customer. I was like,
High five.
Yay!
Say
High
hi.
five!
High five. High five. Yeah. Laugh at me. Yay. Nearly your bedtime. Yeah, that's Keith. I made that noise when I see Keith as well. Jojo, what's the mummy?
Is it wrong of me to say this? Age-old debate.
Welcome back to our second part. Moving into our expert realms of things, we have the legendary, the one and only, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Keith Whatling. He is doing me a big favour. I said, "Hey, can you talk at this event?" And he said, "Sure." I'm in a foreign country right now, drinking a beer, watching the sun go down. But sure, why not? He's that sort of guy that when you ask him, he's always there for you. So I appreciate him giving up his time tonight to talk us through his latest and greatest endeavour, which is business process flows.
I know. I mean, come on, business process flows, right? It's like, what happened with business process flows? Well, I've been building some really high UI and UX value canvas apps recently, and I've been putting them into model-driven apps. I've been embedding stuff, and I've been building custom pages at the wazoo, and I've been selling them to customers, and like I've made it all look beautiful, right? As beautiful as model-driven apps can, because they don't always look beautiful, and I have a real problem with that, right? Like genuinely, I have a real problem with that, because when you're selling these things internally or externally. Now, when I say the word selling, I do mean like you're either in-house, in customer, selling this to your management, your colleagues, your IT department, whoever it is, or you're selling this to a customer, right, who's paying. So we have this notion a lot in software called minimum viable product, right? And what that actually means for me, that means minimum viable product is basically I can create valid business record. Like the solution creates valid business data. That's it, right? There's some other loops around this notion of minimum viable after you've done a POC, right? So minimum viable could go into production, but people would hate it because it is the bare minimum that you need for the product to be viable in the business. So does it create viable business data? Yes or no? Do people love it? Hell no. Do people talk to other people about it? Hell no. So there's a notion on top of MVP, which is MMP, minimum marketable product. So that is, do people talk about this? Do people say, I could sell this to my colleagues, I could buy this? So like in the normal app world on your phone, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to download this app because it looks cool. I can market it, right? And then people are like, oh, I've used this app. I love it. Now you call that the minimum lovable product, right? That's when in a business, someone says, hey, have you tried it? Have you seen this thing that someone's built for me? It's amazing, right? That's the minimum lovable product. That's when you know that what you've built is actually good, right? So inside of the world of Canvas apps, and you saw Lewis build a beautiful Canvas app earlier on, right? And that's how quickly you can get started and you can really up the ante on the UI, right? And for anyone who's like, oh, I'm a developer, I don't know anything about UI, just basically go and steal some UI off the web and copy it and put it into your app and wire it up and make it look that way, right? Like genuinely, that's a thing you can do. It's no problem. So then you get to the back end, these model-driven apps, and these are apps that are driven by data, okay? So I'm going to share my screen and show you one of these like homunculus applications, right? And I've actually got the latest experience turned on, so this is the best it can look at the box, right? So this is as good as it gets, okay? That's, ooh, like, yeah, that's great. That's like as good as it's going to get. And you can see here, like we've got loads of data. We've got loads of like fields and stuff. And this is a record. So this is like a case. And I'm just going to kind of like, these are HR cases. So I'm just going to kind of click into HR case here. And I can see I've got like a header for the data. And I've got all of this blah, blah, blah down here. And I've got this weird timeline thing down the middle. And I've got some more data down the side. And I've got like a tab and all that kind of stuff with some data and all this kind of nonsense, right? But it's a bit ugly, isn't it? I mean, it's not going to win any prizes for best looking interface in the world. And believe me, this is better than the old interface. You're going to see the old interface in a minute. And the previous interface than that, like you can get to in the back end, you can go to what they refer to as the classic experience, which is where you've got a cigar and you're kind of smoking a Hamlet. Other cigars are available. But you literally feel like you're Marty McFly and you've gotten on your hoverboard, got in a DeLorean, buggered off back in time to 1998, and you're sat there with the latest version of Windows going, God, this thing looks so good. And it's that. It's like it's a big cumbersome ERP, it hasn't moved, and it doesn't look very pretty, right? And you try and sell this to people, internal, external, you're coming up against Salesforce and all the rest of it, doesn't work. So how do you then try to improve this incredibly data heavy experience? Well, the first out of the box way to kind of streamline this data experience and actually turn it into a user experience is to use this notion of a business process flow, a BPF, a business process flow. And business process flows have been around for a good couple of years now. There's, I think, was it 2012 they came out? I can't remember. There's some like history or something when they first arrived and they looked slightly different and all the rest of it. But basically, these are these little dots along the top of the screen that identify a process, right? So we've got a little two-step process here. We've got a gross misconduct. We're going to identify it. We've got some buttons here. We've got like drop downs. You can put as many, well, almost as many fields as in there as you want for a good user experience. And the user can literally complete the data in here in a quasi-successful experience, right? It's doable, but not quite, right? And you can get a lot more funky stuff on the page. And And you can kind of progress to the next stage. So I can like move this to the next stage, and this kind of shenanigans. It will now jump to the next stage. It will tell me how long it's been active for, and it will say how long the gross misconduct's been active for, and all that kind of stuff. And when I get to the end, I can kind of do some bits and pieces around finishing it. I get a little tick, and I can finish the business process flow, and I know I've completed that task, right? And I can trigger off another subsequent business process flow where I've got a different process. So let's say this HR case is now going to disciplinary, and I now go off and I do the disciplinary hearing and blah blah blah, and then I sack the person or I reinstate the person, and there could be a different business process flow off the back of that, and they can have conditional logic, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But they're like out the box. When you first come to do them, you're like, okay, and then you're like, oh, I want them to do certain things. Like I want, if something happens over here on the right hand side of the screen, I want it to move back a stage automatically without a user coming in and clicking that button. How do I make that happen? Oh, I would like, when my record creates, to select which business process flow I should start on, right? I might want to control, let's say, that kind of where it had the little, let me go to another one in a moment, where underneath it it said how long the business process step had been running for. I actually might want to control that, because it may be different to when the record was created, or it may be different from when I clicked on the button. Like there might be some external factor that meant that that process was taking longer than it says on the tin. So the SLA to the customer is ever so slightly different from what you're seeing on the screen. So these are kind of like the common bits and pieces. And then I met a guy at the weekend called Ben, and he showed me a trick with PCFs that actually make business process flows like so much better than what they are. So let's get into it, right? So I'm going to kind of come down into my model-driven app there. And this is the back end of the model-driven apps. And I can see I've got my kind of record in here, and I'm going to kind of come into my record, and I can see bits and pieces. I've got my business process flow. And to get into my business process flow editor, we're going to make a new one for the new people on the call. So let's just go and find one of the problems with Power Platform is actually keeping like an active version of the solution up at all times, so you can kind of just get in there and edit stuff. It's part of the fun. You kind of have to pinpoint things. So we can just go and create a new business process flow. So we go into automations, into processes, and off to a business process flow. And we'll call this like another call BPF. Can't never type. Larry knows this. It's one of the best bits of working with Keith is learning all his spelling mistakes, right? And I'm just going to pick a table for that to work off of. So we're going to pick the call. Where's it gone? Oh, come here. Where's my call one gone? It's BPF, isn't it? Sorry. Let's see a minute ago. I swear I could. There you go. Cool BPF table. That was the one we were working off of. This is going to load a rather old-looking interface, a rather shabby-looking old interface. It's not exactly the best. Microsoft are progressively going and updating these things as they go along. This one's not as bad as some of them. And you can see at the top there, I had my first BPF stage. So this represents the spot on the top of the screen, right? And underneath, I have one data step. So this data step isn't set. And the first thing we're going to learn about BPFs, everybody, is this little blue button down the corner here, because you're going to love this, right? You ready? So I'm manually working away, and I'm going to call this like, let's call this like step one. And I'm kind of working away, and I go, right, okay, I'm going to click over here. And I'll call this, and then we'll pick a field, and then we'll go like just delivery address or something. Put the delivery address in, and you'll notice that where the call BPF stage at the top there didn't change. That's because I didn't click this blue apply button. This will drive you potty. You will punch the screen, you will probably kill someone, and likely be the most annoying people nearby. So for goodness sakes, click the blue apply button. And if you've clicked the blue apply button once, click it again for good measure, because it will drive you potty. So let's go back up here and do it the right way. So we just call this one stage 1. And you've got this category field. Now this category field really kind of sits around sales and the first party applications. So genuinely, don't really need that at all. I mean, you can use it if you really want to, but that's more around kind of sales and CRM than anything else. So no point. You can jump to another table. You can jump from one entity to the other, which is really cool. So you can like be in one table and then be doing a process, and then like have to go off to another table and complete a process there, and then come back again. And you can do that. You can only do that across 5 tables per BPF. I seem to remember the rules being. So let's hit apply on that one, and then just pick a step here. So we're going to call this one like this would be like address, add address, and we will put the delivery address in there. We can make this required. Now this is really cool. So on the form, the address might not be required, right? It might not be required in the database, but you can make it required to move to the next stage. So that's really great. Like that's a way of ensuring that data is captured properly. So we like that one. We're very happy about that. So we can then just like kind of come up here and start adding more stuff, right? Adding more things. So there's classic workflows, which I mean, it will be here all night trying to spin one of those up. But there's also this flow preview as well. And this flow preview is really cool because this means that we can actually call a Microsoft flow in there as well. But you'll see at the top, I can add another stage, right, which is kind of adds that another spot on the screen. So that's a secondary stage. But I can also add a condition. Now, the only annoying thing about conditions is that they have to use fields from the previous stage, and that's quite irritating because you don't necessarily want to have those fields on the screen. So I believe you can hide all that kind of shenanigans with JavaScript, but genuinely you want to kind of, you know, you might not want that, and you might want to do some branching bits and pieces. So we can put a condition inside of there, and this is just literally going to say, like, you know, we're going to look at this stage over here, and we're going to say, right, what we're going to do, we're going to say, let's do the attendees equals, it contains data. There's a good one, contains data. So if it's been done, or if there's something, we can go off and say, like, that thing has done that thing, and then we're good. And off the back of this, we can add a secondary kind of stage. We can put stages underneath here. So you can see now we're sort of looping round and looping back. We can even drop stages in the top here. And you can see how we can start building up some quite complex logic. So those spots can all of a sudden branch out and have conditional logic or entirely own branches. They don't have to join back up with the business process flow up here. They can kind of end and exit, so you can have that very own sort of terminal point. So the options for doing these things are really big. So like that's basically how that works. Now, if I go and try and create this and save this, it's going to go absolutely nutso, right? Because the validation is just going to like freak out because I don't think I put in enough. I may have put in enough, I don't know, for it to save and be valid, right? So quite often you'll get an error saying this thing isn't valid because there you go. So it's all happy, this one. But like the validate, there we go. So when we hit validate, actually there's a bunch of errors that I didn't see. So you can see here, you can create only use the steps in the previous stage, all that kind of shenanigans. So there's a lot of like what appears to be successful isn't successful until you hit the validate thing. So you've gone merrily building your business process flow, and then you kind of hit this barrier. So rules of the game: save, validate, and you'll get your way through the BPF. Right now, once you've made a BPF, you might want it to start looking and feeling a bit different. So let's go and have a look at my BPF. So here's my BPF on my screen here, right? And you see I've got my kind of table. Now what I've done, instead of on the previous app you saw, and bear in mind, you notice the screen looks a little bit different because I haven't got the modern experience turned on, is I've divided the tables up. Instead of my screen just being full of tables, full of data, which I could switch back at some point and have like a log screen with all that on if I want to kind of a primarily view data experience. What I'm looking at here is what some people in the business call task groups, right? So we're trying to break the app down into manageable segments that the business process flow can chomp up, right? So if I kind of like was to go through this, I'd say, okay, right, so that's this, and then that pending approval, I could sort of like tick to yes, tick to no. Now, the nice piece of this is, and watch this, so like instead of having the yes, no fields in here, what we've actually done is change the way in which we've used the business process flow. So instead of getting the user to enter data in the business process flow itself, we actually get the user to edit the data on the screen, thereby using a much better user experience because you've got the full power of, you know, PCFs and, well, not so much PCF, but like the search and all that kind of stuff. You're using better screen real estate to realize things rather than trying to complete it in this tiny little box on the screen. So instead of doing that, what we've done is in Dataverse, we've got a load of fields on this table. And I'll show you here, like my cool BPF table. We've got a load of fields. Instead of just like looking at a count, we've actually got some Boolean fields here. And I know this is bad data architecture. The data architects on this call are going to be like absolutely cringing and wanting to die. And Lee Baker would be one of those people who would be unhappy with me. But I've added fields on here, true or false fields, yes, no fields to manage the business process flow, right? It's a point of contention in the community about whether you should do this or not. I'm like, well, it's no harm, so I'm no problem. And then at least we know that that process was successfully completed or not, right? So we've got Boolean switches, and we're switching those switches, in this case with business rules, because we've got no other JavaScript running on the form. And if we had JavaScript running on the form, we would not be using business rules, we would be using JavaScript because them's the rules, don't break them. And we'd be saying, instead of that, we're just going to show the switches. We're just going to show set tick, set no. But better than that, what we've done is we've overlaid those ticks with PCFs. So you've got a very nice, well, almost nice, I'm working on it, visual representation of whether the user has completed the task or not completed the task, right? Now, on the top there as well, you can see I've got this button that says run flow. And this is where you can trigger off an automation from a business process flow, right? So I could move to the next stage, but I want to trigger this off. And you're going to see a few things happening here, right? So we get this kind of, this is this business process, this flow is an approvals flow. So it's actually going to provide me with a dialogue, right? So I'm going to say, hi, I'd like this approved, please. And I could specify pretty much what I want in here, date fields, so on and so forth. You can control what's here, not in a very elegant fashion, but you can require the users input this stuff. And I'm going to hit the flow and it's running, right? The flow is now running and it's processing. You see there, like this little thing says it's processing. The flow is running, right? So what we're going to look for now is just going to kind of jump over here. I'll just jump out to Outlook. And we should have, if the flows run, fingers crossed because it was running earlier on. You'll get a notification in a moment. Hopefully it has. If not, I'm going to look silly. We've got this flow here. Which is running. So we're just waiting for that kind of notification to come in and we can see that flow there. see that we're now waiting for an approval. So there's somewhere, oh, here we go. I've got an approval. Here we go. Wait for that to load up. I'm going to approve that. I'm going to say, yeah, sure. And submit that. Come back into my table and I can kind of refresh the page just to refresh to see what's happened. And look, it's automatically moved my business process flow all the way along to order validation, right? Now, in this, and I've updated this processing thing to say succeeded as well, because that wouldn't happen before. Like, you wouldn't be able to just update, you couldn't update that little thing. It's annoying. So I'm going to show you how to do that, right? So let's get into the behind the scenes of the business process flow. Let's break open the kimono on what that looks like, right? So inside of a business process flow, there's a few things to know, right? First of all, the business process flow, when you create one, you make a Dataverse table, right? So there is a table created in Dataverse that holds all of the business process flows that you call for that particular BPF. So each record goes and creates a record saying this business process was running and this is what's happening on it. So let's just go and have a look at that quickly so we can see that. Hang on a minute. Never have enough flipping solution screens running when I'm running BPFs. When I'm running Dataverse, it'll drive you round the bend. In fact, we need to add that table. So you don't, when you make the BPF, it doesn't add the table, which is annoying. No, we'll just include everything for now. That shouldn't normally do that, but it will. And you do it for this particular thing. So you'd see here, each time I've run a business process flow, it's happening there. And you can see there's a bunch of rows, and you kind of be able to go through and see that. Oh, hang on, it's the wrong one. BPF that's called. That's the one. Wonder why it's wrong. Getting confused with the BPF tables. Happens a lot. There we go. So there's order validation is the active stage. So I can see what stage the BPF is. This record's currently on, and I can see that, you know, the what record it's related to as well. I can see the parent table of the call BPF table, which is over here. One called sausages, one called mash. And that's great because now you've got got reference between the process and the table. But there's some other tables that sit around the business process flow that we need to be aware of. And there's the actual process table, then there's the process logs table. And you don't necessarily see them when you're playing around with Power Apps, right? When you're playing around in this particular interface, right? So let me just get back to my flow here, and I'm going to hit edit so we can see. So the first thing we've got here is just when a flow step is executed, right? Let's walk through the anatomy of this flow and how it works, right? So when you click on that flow step, right, that button, you've got this incredibly cool connector, which is when a flow step is executed, and it spits out a ton of JSON, right? And it's not apparent in the first moment what it all is, right? It just isn't. So what we can do is just kind of like look at the IntelliSense here and see what we get out of that top level. So you've got kind of like flows workflow log ID. I don't know what that means. BPS instance ID. Again, that's not exactly terribly helpful. It just says, you know, business process flow instance ID. What does that mean, right? So you've got to do a little bit of digging. And once you do a little bit of digging, let me bring my Visual Studio that I made earlier. Or did I make it earlier? Where's it gone? Oh no, hang on, 1 minute. This one. Too many windows open. So this is what you see. Everyone can see that, right? I've got prettier on, so it's a little bit janky. 1 minute.
Can you zoom in a bit, Keith?
Yeah, is that better?
Perfect.
Hang on, let me just hide that thing. So you've got a couple of GUIDs there, and in Dataverse, almost everything is a GUID, right? Gotta love them. Unfortunately, sometimes they're a little bit samey, so you really need to pay attention to them, because it's not the first time you looked at a GUID and it looks identical to another one, and you're like, and there's one bloody character missing. And you would have spent 3 hours wondering what the hell's going on, because you just read the first 3 and the last 3 and missed the middle ones. So this workflow log thing appears to be the flow instance. So when the actual flow that's running, that's the log for the actual physical Power Automate flow that's running. And then you've got things like the definition, which is the GUID for the actual physical BPF. So which BPF is actually running, that's this one, right? And then you've got the entity stage record ID, right? And I was writing this down like late last night, so I've got to remember what it all is. This is the record for the table that the BPF's been acted on. So that's the actual GUID of the sausage record on the call BPF table, or the MASH record on the actual call BPF table, right? And you see where I'm going with this now. And then you've got the process stage ID. So that's account or validate, or this the spots, which spot is currently active, okay? And you'll be like, okay, that's pretty cool, right? And I would agree, it is, right? And one of the things I want to take home from this is I think it's actually possible from this step to build reusable things like approvals if you were putting some other variables into Dataverse in terms of like environment variables, or having some lookups to some other tables somewhere. Depends on how you wanted to do it, but you could conceivably build some very rudimentary flows that do the same, like common things like approvals or sending an email out, right? And literally kind of just build one flow that sends out 90% of the emails, or 90% of the notifications, or 90% of the things, because you can get so much information about what this sucker's about when you hit that button. So you hit that button and it really is the ability to use once and reuse over and over again, because you can identify the record, the BPF that it's being called from, and so on and so forth. So I think it's really tremendous, right? So I've got a list. I've got a list rows beneath that, and I'm doing that for one reason, because again, I want to actually kind of like do some cool stuff with it. And I'm going to go off and I'm going to list rows. I'm going to list the process stages. Now remember, list rows is a la carte menu, not a buffet. So you kind of have to pass in some bits and pieces. So this is the only bit of horrible kind of OData query you're going to have to do here. But we're just literally going to return any of the process stages that are to do with this business process flow definition. And the reason why we want to get those back is that we want to kind of go and look at what the other BPF stages are, so we can move it this way or move it that way, and we want to do that dynamically, right? Now the next bit, and I apologize, I'm going to be very non-programmery. I really hate like end users having to kind of know what GUIDs are, and like even myself, I can't stand a GUID if I like, because it doesn't tell me anything. It just is a load of numbers. It gives me an headache, right? So I've got a scope and I've got a filter, and I'm just going to filter all of the process flows stages that's returned to me. And if someone messes around with a business process flow name, yes, this is going to break, right? It's just a word of warning, right? You know, you can have a map that says that this thing is this good and all that kind of shenanigans. But this order validation is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that title in there. And I'm going to say that that is equal to this thing. So it's just going to return me that one record out of the process stage ID. I'm going to pass the JSON because I'm, you know, ridiculously lazy via a first. So I'm just going to get I'm not going to get any stupid applies to each inside of my flow, because I hate those when they're not there for a reason. So I'm just going to call first on it. I'm going to pass JSON, convert it from a list to an object, and then I'm all good. And Matt's going to tell me there's about another easy way of doing that, but that's fine. I can handle that. This next bit is really cool. So that little thing that said processing, right, on the BPF, when we were in here, this little succeeded bit that said processing a moment ago, right? This, all you have to do, so simple, right? All you have to do is hit the process logs table, throw in the workflow ID, which is the one at the top, the one that's the actual physical flow that's currently running, like the Power Automate that's running. Throw that sucker in, and you can change the status to any of those, right? Cool. You know, I'm sure the customer's going to want something. It's to say something specific, but that's what we've got, right? And I haven't even really checked to see. Oh, there's some other bits and pieces in there, but there we go. So then we're just going to do the standard Power Automate, like wait for an approval, which is a Microsoft technology. It's for those of you who don't know, it's a solution that installs. When you first do it, it takes about 10 minutes for the first one to appear, but after that, they're fairly rapid. And they use adaptive cards, all sorts of adaptive card stuff. It's great, fun. Adaptive cards. And you can get them to do all sorts of things. You can replace the adaptive card once the approval's been made and all this kind of stuff. And it's a whole session unto itself, right? So just like, you know, things happen. I've made it really simple. And there it's gone. So we're just going to come and look at the outcome here, right? So I've got 3 steps. The first one, just going to go and update the call BPFs table, right? So I'm just going to go in and say, like, something's happened. So we don't really need to update anything in that because there's nothing to update, right? But I could go and put something in there. It's normal that you would put something on that table, change the status reason, change something. The next one, we're going to go off and actually move the ticker along the line, right? So we're going to move it along the business process flow. And there's some confusion online about how to do this. And I'll just cover that off because you'll read blogs and they'll tell you need to do this thing and you don't, right? So the first thing you need to do is update the process stage ID, right? So that active there, and you see here, I've got this process stages because I need to always pass in the pluralized table name. I've got my brackets around it just to say this is what I want. And then I've got me from my pass JSON at the top there. That is the process stage for order valid, right? And then I'm just passing in, I have to pass this one in, have to pass in the reference to the table, right? That actual call BPFs table. They're the only 2 fields I need to pass in. Online, there will be a lot of talk about updating the transverse path. I'm going to tell you what the transverse path is. The transverse path is a concatenated list of GUIDs which hold where the business process flow has been in the steps. So the traverse path is basically like, I went here, backwards and forwards, because you can move the backward process flow backwards and I finished it, right? And then that's it closed. But it would record all of those in a long list of all those steps in a long list of, and you don't need that. So you see a lot of people talking about concatenating the traverse path. Not needed. You just throw that in and it automatically calculates the traverse path for you. So that's one big step out of the way. And then the last one, again, is literally just hitting that process log that it succeeded, right? So now you can control the BPF. Now, a few other bits and pieces. So a reason why I had this one in here was I just wanted to show you a couple of bits off the back of this call BPFs table. So on the call BPFs table, this is the actual record that the business process flow is running on top of, right? You have got things like this, the process ID. And that process ID is the business process flow that starts when the record is created or that is active on that record now. So you can physically switch it by changing that. So that allows you to say, right, if this is a red record, then use a red business process flow. It's a blue record, use a blue business process flow. And then one last thing, on the actual update BPFs row itself here, there is a active stage started on here, right? This active stage started on. This is where you can control the little date that appears underneath this. Let's see if there you go, this is the 14 minutes. That time, you can control when that is, okay, off the back of that. You cannot control this active for 48 minutes. There's nothing you can do in the world to affect that particular time without some really weird unsupported JavaScript that will never work. So don't do that. But you can control that with affecting the thing. So you might want to have it that this activity here is always showing the very first, like it's taken this long to get here and the customer's going out of their mind. But that might, the initial business process flow might have started a week after. So that active for, if we could control that, it'd be the best thing ever. But I've not found a way of doing that yet, he says, yet. So there's that. One last thing to show. The XRM toolbox is a honkingly good toolkit. And one of the easiest things that I've done in a long time is to download this tool. And I don't think it's going to scale very well on the screen. So I'm really sorry about that. But it's, if you guys can zoom in, I don't think I can. I might be able to with my magic Microsoft Power Tools. I don't know, maybe not. Is you can upload a business process flow. You can select a BPF. You can see that I've got BPFs that are cool, and I can click on here, and I can pick a tile there, and I can come in here and I can select from any of the PCFs that I've got loaded. They want to really be of the same type and all that kind of stuff. But I think that that's a really nice way of turbocharging the BPF and making it look pretty. And I apologize for that spot, that little tick, not being a bit more elegant on the right side of the drop shadow, because that would have looked nice. So does anybody have, I think that's everything. That is everything. Does anybody have any questions on BPFs? So task groups, PCFs, flows to move them backwards and forwards. And I think it makes the model-driven app experience a bit nicer to use and a bit more relevant. Because I think one of the things I've struggled with is when I do a demo, I sometimes struggle to put together a business process flow. And it's just like break it down into the conversation that someone's having or the stages that someone's got to take to get something through, and make sure they're in your demo or make sure they're in your app, because they are stonkingly cool. Any questions in the chat?
There's a question on what the XRM toolbox tool is. That's PCF to BPF.
PCF to BPF by Mr. Tengiz. Very, very, very cool.
There's another one that's quite useful, because what a lot of businesses don't understand is that when you move from Dataverse, from another data source to Dataverse, you have a bunch of records that are probably somewhere along your BPF, but there's no way to set that en masse. There's another tool called BPF Manager, which is made by Clement Olivier and Gus Gonzalez, which does exactly that. You can do a fetch XML query, figure out what status those records should be in, and it'll automatically set it to the right stage in your BPF. So it's another really good tool, especially if you deal with a lot of migrations.
Nice. And then the one last thing that I found at the end that was from Ben at the weekend. Ben talked me about task groups and PCFs for this thing. So I've just got a huge shout out to Ben and his blog here, which is Ben de Blanken. And in his blog is excellent for this. Really is absolutely spectacular. Was the last pièce de résistance was actually kind of sending a notification off the back of that in the notifications table and using Ivan Flicko's XRM toolbox in-app notifications. And the thing is really cool. because you can build your notification in here and actually test it, and it fires it off to the app. So Ivan's just done what he normally does and blow everybody's mind. But the really cool bit was that Ivan's given you the ability to, from here, when you, and I haven't tested this because I literally was building this before I came on, was like to click, I think it's this one because it's the top one. It may or may not work, I don't know. There you go. To actually load a custom page, right? Now, granted, it didn't do it in the same window, but I'm sure there's a way of doing that somehow. But like, I'd love to see that, so that custom page is a fly out at some point, because that would just be truly awesome. But yeah, you can load a record from it and open up a quick view form and all sorts of goodness. So yeah, really excited to see what that can do as it rolls out. But yeah, I love it. Good. And it's think of it like this: it supports asynchronous work, and that's what the world's all about. And SharePoint hasn't got it.
There is actually another question.
Oh yeah.
To Ian Greenhouse is asking, can't you hide the HTML node via JS, or is the name or ID tag generated at the time?
Say that again, Trish. Oh, hang on, let me see. 1 minute.
Can you hide the HTML node in via JavaScript, or is the name or ID tag generated at the time?
Which one's that? Where we're talking about? Sorry.
Ian, do you want to like elaborate?
The node bit. What, here?
I think that's where he was talking about. I'm not sure where the question was at.
That's the one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've not. I asked Gods, and God said don't do that because it's be sort of semi-unsupported, so don't do it. But if you guys have done it and found it how to do it in a supportive way, then that's what these user groups are all about. Sharing is caring.
Yeah.
If you
Any
have,
other questions for
if
the
you're happy
awesome
doing a
Mr.
session.
Whatling? Keith, you knocked it out the park as always, bud.
No problem. I'll be around. Ask me anything afterwards, guys. So if you're on YouTube and you missed it, great. But I'll hang around for a bit if anyone's got any questions, especially any new guys or anybody who's like wants some architectural help.
There's one thing that I do want to say before we wrap up. Thank you so much, Keith, and I know Lois is gone. But please, I've been dropping the feedback link in the chat. Please complete the feedback form for the sessions as well as for the general event, because that's how we're going to basically be able to improve the rest for you. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed it. If you do have questions, then feel free, pop them on YouTube, hook up with people on LinkedIn. I mean, we're all nice. We like connecting with people on LinkedIn, talking to people, and you can find us all on. Sorry, I've just read Matt Collins Jones's comment there. That is, yeah, just made me laugh. How did you do that news ticker over Teams? It's not actually over Teams. It's using a piece of software called vMix. But OBS can do the same as well. Yes. So, but yes, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening. One last thing to kind of say is our next user group session is scheduled for drum roll, the 5th of July, where we will be back for our next virtual user group, and we look forward to announcing some exciting speakers in the coming weeks, and we look forward to seeing you all then, and have a great time, folks, and thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, y'all.
That was fun.